everyone. Thank you for joining Water Now's Tap into Resilience Summit. This is Powerful Partnerships, Equity and Stakeholder Engagement in Nonprofit Municipal Programs. My name is Georgia Biesmeyer. I'll be your host today. I'm joined by my colleague, Amy Weinporter, for technical support. We've got a few housekeeping items before we dive in. We do welcome your questions for our panelists, and we'll have lots of time for Q&A at the end of the session after all of the presentations. If you have questions for the speakers, please feel free to submit them at any time during the presentation. To submit questions for the speakers, we'll have you go to the polls tab and you can click enter your questions for the speaker, click here to answer, then enter your own or vote, and then write your question where it says enter your response here and submit by hitting ask question. So for questions related to technical troubleshooting on the Pathwell platform or other logistical concerns, please select the chat tab, type your messages in the field and hit send. Lastly, a recording of this session will be available following the presentation. So that's it, and now on to the presentation. I would like to introduce our esteemed moderator, Dr. Jalon White-Newsome. Jalon is the CEO and founder of Empowering a Green Environment and Economy, a strategic consultancy working to transform communities through people-centered solutions. Her expertise crosses areas of climate change, public health, racial equity, and urban flooding. Jalon spent the past 5 years as a senior program officer at the Kresge Foundation, leading the environment program's grant portfolio on climate resilient and equitable water systems and serving as a core team member leading the foundation's work addressing the intersections of climate change and public health. Dr. White-Newsome is also an adjunct professor at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and continues to engage in research on climate, health, and equity. And now I'd like to hand it over to Jalon to introduce the panelists.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Georgia. And I was loving that jazz music. So wonderful. And welcome to our virtual audience. I want to start out by saying that I'm calling from southeastern Michigan on the original lands of the Potawatomi. And I would say for the past 20 years now, I've had the privilege and opportunity to work and try and build and foster collaborations and partnerships across many sectors and fields. And from my experience, and maybe you will agree and give me a virtual high five, building partnerships can be a little messy. They can be a little challenging because typically folks come to the table with their own needs, their own agenda, and their own perspectives on an issue. However, when partnerships are done right, starting with creating an environment of trust, there are multiple benefits to be had by all, particularly as we think about effectively addressing water inequity. So if done right, powerful partnerships can help everyone get access to clean and affordable water, manage wastewater, and build more resilient systems that can withstand the impacts of climate change. Well, you all are in for a treat because we have 4 sets of powerful partnerships that will share their experiences and unique stories and discuss the origins of their partnerships, the barriers, how the partnerships are supported financially, and ultimately the impact of their work. So I encourage you to read the full bios of each of our panelists, but I'm going to provide just a brief introduction to our speakers before we jump into the panel. So representing Chicago, our Commissioner Kimberly DuBouclet, a proud native resident of the South Side of Chicago, who serves as the Commissioner for the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. With her is Meg Kelly, the Director of the Space to Grow program, a part of the Healthy Schools campaign, which is working to revitalize schoolyards all over Chicago. Representing Virginia is Mr. John Rower from the village of Hobson. He's a community activist in Suffolk, Virginia, that has a powerful personal story to share with us today about water access. Also is Hope Cupid, CEO of the Southeast Rural Community Assistance Project, I believe better known as SERCAP, who has been working in community economic development for over 25 years. Representing the city of Camden, so we're moving across the mat to New Jersey, is Miesha Mitchell, Vice President of Cooper's Ferry Partnership, where she has been working to address planning and redevelopment issues in Camden's neighborhoods for many, many years. And with her is Andrew Criken. He has multiple roles. He's the managing director of Moonshot Mission and the former executive director and chief engineer of Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority. And he's going to share his depth of experience in the water space. Representing Denver, Colorado, last but certainly not least, is Marshall Brown, general manager of Aurora Water, where he is responsible for managing all water efforts from potable to wastewater to stormwater in beautiful Colorado. And Nate Edge, a project manager for Mile High Youth Corps Energy and Water Conservation Program, where he is deeply involved with the community. So as I said, you are in for a treat. And now I will turn it over to our partners from Chicago.
Hi, again, my name is Commissioner Kim DuBouclet, and I'm with the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. And I am here to present with my partner, Meg Kelly. And today we're going to talk a little bit about our Space to Grow program. So I think the slides are rolling. So our Space to Grow program is basically a partnership between the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, the Chicago Water Department, and a couple of other agencies, which Meg will tell you about. And what we do is we built these fabulous playgrounds, which are shown on the screen, in partnership, and they are green infrastructure playgrounds. So I'll let Meg talk a little bit about it, and I'll just jump in when it's appropriate.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And we're super excited to be able to speak with you all today. So thank you for welcoming us. So Space to Grow as the commission. So I'm Meg Kelly, and I work for Healthy Schools Campaign. So we're a nonprofit organization with a national scope, but based in Chicago. And our mission is, healthy students are better learners, and we work to ensure that all kids have access to healthy learning environments and that health and wellness is incorporated into every aspect of the school experience. So not green infrastructure, but I personally have a number of years of experience managing and working with partnerships around green infrastructure. But my organization does our work by advocating for strong wellness policies at the local, state, district, national levels. And we have a special focus in Chicago to support this Chicago Public School District in implementing those policies sort of on the ground. And we do that work by organizing parents and community members to have, the resources and to advocate for healthy initiatives for their kids and students. We also train teachers and educate and provide resources for principals to also implement those initiatives. And one of the reasons why we sort of became involved with the Space to Grow program is through that work, particularly around organizing parents, we were instrumental in having recess reinstated after about 30 years of it being optional. And so it was very important for the work that we do to make sure that kids have access to are able to have physical activity, or movement throughout the day, and access to nutrition education and things like this. And when recess was reinstated, so was daily PE. And we heard from our partners on the ground that, we just don't have good outdoor space to support vibrant programs for these initiatives. At the same time, we were introduced to Open Lands, who's also a nonprofit based in Chicago. They're our regional land trust. Their mission is to connect people to nature in their daily lives, and specifically right where they live. And what better place to do that than at schools, where hopefully we'll all be going again pretty soon in person, but kids are there, their families are there, they're in the middle of neighborhoods, they're community anchors as far as spaces go. And so together we had partners at Chicago Public Schools. Open Lands also had a partnership already, or had been working for a number of years with the Water Reclamation District. They knew that at the time that the district was starting to invest financially in green stormwater infrastructure in a pretty major way. And at the time, Mayor Emanuel had just announced an initiative for investing in sustainability initiatives in the city as well. So, and the school district had just announced a campaign to make sure that every elementary school had playgrounds at them. So that was something that was missing from many schools. And so we were able to kind of take all these partners, bring them in a room together and talk about all these different goals and needs and come up with a vision for the Green Schoolyards program of Space to Grow. So like Commissioner said, we're using green stormwater infrastructure to help with flooding in the neighborhoods. So Chicago, and I'll let you talk about this a little bit more, Kim, too. Chicago has big flooding issues, and particularly in basements. So these are schoolyards that are located in neighborhoods that have a high frequency of basement flooding. This tends to be in our historically underinvested neighborhoods, particularly on the south and west sides of Chicago. So these are neighborhood schools, traditional neighborhood schools, where we're building these outdoor spaces, and they become community parks as well. So outside of school time, after they're done being living laboratories for kids and places for teachers to be able to to do their best work, particularly around wellness and connecting people to nature. They become these community parks that are open for everybody to use and to gather and to play. And so it's been a really great partnership, I think. So far, we have 30 schools in the program. And together, those are capturing over 17 million gallons of stormwater annually, keeping that out of our combined sewer system during very heavy storms, which if you come here in May, you're gonna feel it. And we've trained over 600 teachers. We've provided hands-on nature-based education to almost 10,000 students. And another thing that we do, we've been able to provide some additional education and outreach to over 1,000 community members, and particularly around garden and stewardship of the spaces and stormwater education. So one thing that I haven't mentioned yet, which is critical to why Healthy Schools Campaign and Open Lands are part of this program, is the mission-based work that we do around engaging communities. So each of these spaces, and you can see there's a number of different photos that you're seeing that have very different schoolyards, because these are each designed by the communities that they serve. And so part of the work that we do as mission-based organizations who are supported by philanthropic and corporate partners is that input process, is the education outreach and the partnership management. And then agencies like the Water Reclamation District, Department of Water Management, and Chicago Public Schools are providing that capital investment for the schoolyard renovation themselves. So
and I'm going to jump in real quick, because I think I zoomed past exactly what we do at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, so that the audience understands why this is such an important partnership. So at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, we are responsible for reclaiming the wastewater for over 5 million residents in Cook County, which happens to be the second largest county in the country. So anything that goes down your drain, down the toilet, down the sewer, we reclaim that water and we clean it, and we make sure that it doesn't end up back into our fresh water supply, which is Lake Michigan. So when we have these huge storms, particularly that's been happening lately with climate change, sometimes our sewers get overwhelmed, and sometimes our streams and our streets get overwhelmed, and the water backs up not only into the streets, but into basements. So if we have partnerships like we do with Healthy Schools, and we have these playgrounds that can help absorb some of this excess water, it helps us with our flooding issues here in Chicago. So I think it's just a win-win. Both it's a win for the community, it's a win for the children as a playground, and it's a win for all the residents of Chicago. So to capture the excess rainwater and stormwater, so it doesn't end up backing up into basements and into streets. So that's a little bit of background that may help explain why this is such a wonderful program and why we're so happy to be partners with you.
Yeah, and so there again, since it's such a comprehensive and holistic set of goals and programs, this is the best that we can scratch the surface on the program during the time, because I know we have other folks who are ready to share. But we're happy to entertain any questions that you might have. We've been at this since about 2013, and we are now entering the next phase of scaling this to more schools throughout Chicago. So hopefully in another session we'll be able to come and talk to you about more of that.
In a broader picture for Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, we're looking to use green infrastructure as much as we can, and this is a great way for use of that type of technology. I think that's it.
Hello. I just want to make sure queued up that I can start. Okay. Hello, this is Hope Cupid with SIRCAP, and wanted to introduce our project. We have been working with the Hobson Village now for over 30 years. And myself and John are going to speak about our story. Our story is a little different. We're working with a community that was set up raising oysters, an oyster farm, former slaves, and they were very independent because they had their own water system. And I would, next slide, please. Okay, what we're going to do is listen to a story.
SIRCAP has helped many communities, but one in particular I want to speak about is Hobson. Hobson, we all went down and noticed the problem. They did not have adequate housing with indoor plumbing. So with help from resources that we had, we were able to build homes and get everyone hooked up to adequate water system.
My name is Nancy, and I've been here all my life. I was born and raised here. This is my husband, John, our great-grandson, Tavis here.
Well, this home that we have here, it replaces the old home that my wife was born and raised in. And the old house had begun to deteriorate to the point where it was just not usable anymore. Of course, it was that time that SIRCAP came in and saw the need. So the old house was torn down, and this is what you see as a response to the program that SIRCAP has out there.
SIRCAP doesn't just build water systems, we build communities. We are a service organization that builds and helps communities sustain their quality of life. You can help by becoming a voice. You can help by giving us resources. You can even help by helping us to have town hall meetings and organizing the communities to fight for what they need. Most of them just want to have the basics that we all take for granted. You can go to our website, www.sircap.org, and there's a donate button there, or you can come and volunteer.
Thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed that video as much as we enjoyed making it. I'm just going to speak briefly, and then I'm going to pass it on to John Thrower. He has an amazing story, by the way. So I'm just going to give a brief history about the Hobson Village. Hobson had a community water well system, and those members of the community actually themselves maintained the water source and controlled access so to the residents that were hooked up to that system. But let me tell you a little something about Hobson. Hobson was a once thriving, self-sustaining community. As you see in the slide, they have were oyster farmers. And we also believe that this was started by former slaves, some of whom we believe were once part of the Williamsburg's Carter's Grove plantation. The Hobson Village is made up of two villages. There's an upper and there's a lower village, about 60 homes. They also have two churches there. Both of the churches also were served by two wells, owned and operated by Hobson Artesian Well Association and the Hobson Civic Water Corporation. So each well, unfortunately, had been condemned, and those wells were still operating under a consent order for producing water that did not meet federal and state federal drinking standards. Mainly, it was the fluoride levels. That was mainly the main concern. Although the community and individual water companies worked to comply with the consent orders, I mean, they did quarterly sampling, they gave information to the public for any violation. They did not abandon the wells as directed by the state. And the city of Suffolk had a main water line running right through Hobson Village by the time the consent orders were issued, but the residents still refused to connect to that water system. So despite that, and other small privately owned systems, just like Hobson, also had fluoride levels in excess of the legal limits. Hobson residents claimed that they were never experienced those health issues that were, described, their teeth and bone damage. They often said, we have great water. Our water is pure and everyone here is healthy and we live a long time. So after the issuance of the consent order directing that the existing wells be abandoned, the customers wanted to connect to the city water system, but a lot of customers had grievances about that. First, the complaint was the government was using this to interfere with their self-governance of their own village. They felt forced by the closure of their water systems and that they were being discriminated against. Use of the private water system felt that they were being deprived of their right to choose the water source and the cost and the control of their water. And they thought that the consent orders would help them just to drill new wells. They could just get out of it. And then they could filter out the fluoride and avoid having to go on public water. However, community member John Thrower, he approached SERCAP with an idea. He said, well, let's just purchase new property and let's build a new well. And then we can just start a new water system. But we said, well, John, we don't believe you need to start another water system. So we held 2 community meetings with the residents and we discussed what their options were. So we looked at cost, and that's a good place to start because when you start showing people money, then that's where decisions get made. We looked at cost of how much would it cost if Hobson did this and pay for them themselves. It was $85 a month just for them to do that. And we showed them just by connecting to city water, your bill would be $35 a month. And that was more affordable. They agreed. So we went home back to Roanoke, Virginia, and we were able to award the community $160,000 to cover both the city's connection and availability fees and the construction costs for those new lines to each home. So this small utility did not need to go it alone. Hobson found that partnering with SERCAP was effective. It helped them engage with the Suffolk public water system and also helped their community advance to have an equitable future water supply for the residents of Hobson. Now, we did have some barriers. The first was that they were paying an annual assessment, but the repairs were not being made to the system, and the system was constantly out of compliance with the state. And the second was financial barriers to starting and operating their own system. These costs were very significant, and they could not do it. So now, since the systems are in and in place, the impact of this program helping them, they are growing. I was just there. New homes are being built. New people are buying property. And now they even want to put septic lines in, but I don't know about that. John will talk more about that. And the financing, the funds that we gave, the $160,000, helped to disconnect the old wells from the system and cap off the lines. And we also were able to give them a discounted connection fee. So I'm very excited about this because, like I said, we have been working with this community for over 30 years. And John, now you are on.
Thank you so much, Hope. My name is John Thrower. I am a resident of the community of Hobson. The Hobson story is a story about people. My personal story has been well documented, but we've got to understand that it's more than just one person. My relationship along with my wife and I started with SERCAP about 12 years ago. You know, a lot of good people fall on bad times. And my wife and I are a perfect example of that, I feel. 12 years ago, after living years in an old 2-story rundown home that belonged to my wife's mother, very few people even knew how we lived there. The bathroom was non-existent. We basically lived in one room. But through the pride and the embarrassment, you know, we really didn't let people know exactly what we were going through. And we were not alone. Hobson is comprised of, I would say, 90% senior citizens. Now, I'll soon be 70 years old, and believe it or not, I'm one of the babies. And these folks there for decades and decades, them and their parents made themselves satisfied with inadequate water and using outhouses. Yes, outhouses. When I first came to Hobson about 30 years ago, there were still people using outhouses. When our partnership started with SERCAP, roughly about 12 years ago, when I came on board, there were still houses that people were using outhouses. That should not be. That should not be in this country. But through the partnership with SERCAP, we began to move. It was hard work. But I do want to explain a few things to you. You know, again, it just wasn't about me and my wife. I believed in speaking up. I always felt that way. And again, that pride and that embarrassment of my friends and my neighbors, people kept things to themselves. And they always kept their little problems to themselves. So often, many of us, we lived on bottled water. It was nothing for us to travel to Walmart to buy bottled water because the water we were using had particles in it, or it was smelly. Many times my wife would wash clothing, and even after they dried, your clothing would have a scent in it. These were not good times. And I'm gonna tell you, to have my neighbors and my friends, people would call me on the phone at different times of day or night to ask me, well, John, what can we do? We got to do something about this. My water's off. What do you mean your water's off? There were many times that through a lot of leaks in the water lines, we wake up and your water wasn't on. Again, our story is well documented in the media. We've actually been on the news several times because these things should not happen. And to have a grandparent to get up in the morning and say, I can't give my baby a bath because we don't have any water. No, that's not acceptable. I made a choice myself to step out on faith. And I made my story the Hobson story because somebody had to say something. Somebody had to do something. So as Hope said, roughly about 4.5 years ago, I text Hope, Cupid, and I gave her a call and I reached out and asked her, no, isn't there something that can be done? Can't we do something to change what's happening? Because people are still shy, people are still embarrassed because they don't want others to know that here, a community right smack dab in a flourishing area, you've got people with inadequate water and septic systems. And it was that time Hope Cupid said, well, John, give me a couple of weeks, let me see what we can come up with. Thus, that's started our relationship again as far as getting our water situations squared away. It's a tough thing to get up on a Sunday morning and you find out your church service is canceled for that day because the water is off, because you've got leaks on the street. It's a rough deal to have city officials to bring news people out, to have them to shine cameras on the side of your streets where you've got water bubbling. Once again, that's something that cannot be. So after all the hard work and the meetings, just as Hope just talked about, the partnership flourished and it's grown. And I'm here to tell you that through my personal experience, that this partnership has made a difference, not just in my life, but in the lives of my wife and my children and grandchildren, because it gives me an opportunity to say I helped leave them a legacy, something that they can say, you know, this is what my papa did. My papa helped us get some water. And it's important to know that now that I don't have these mothers and grandmothers calling my home late at night and in the morning to say what they don't have, because they have water now. And thanks to this partnership, this ongoing partnership, it has flourished. And yes, we have some neighbors that are talking about getting on sewage and all that. We're supposed to be having meetings on that, but that's something that we'll have to talk about down the line. So we're pretty much undecided on what we're going to do on that. But again, the Hobson story is a story of people, just regular people.
Thank
Just
you so
regular
much,
people.
John. That's what we're all about, just regular people. We appreciate you all allowing us to be with you today. And thank you for letting us tell our story.
Thank you.
Well, that's a very difficult story to follow up on, but Miesha Mitchell and I will try to follow up. It's a tough act to follow, but thanks so much to John for telling his inspiring story, and to Hope and all the great work you're doing at SORCAP to help rural communities in the Southeast. So Miesha and I are going to speak about Camden, New Jersey, and our work together. I worked for many years at the water utility there, the wastewater utility there, and Miesha worked at a and does still work at an important nonprofit in the city of Camden. Camden is a very economically distressed community with a median household income pre-COVID of about $26,000 and pre-COVID unemployment rate of 10%. So a very challenged community. We basically have three takeaways. We'll go through our presentation, but if there are three things that we hope that you'll get from our presentation, they are these. First of all, and Mr. Thrower really underscored this first point, we really strongly believe that everyone is entitled to safe drinking water and clean waterways, no matter where they live or what they look like. And that is really critical, watchword for water utilities and people in the water sector striving for water equity. Second, that public water utilities can and should be anchor institutions in their communities, that they're committed to doing what is right for the community to improve the quality of life. Of course, they have to stay within their legal lanes, but they should strive to widen those lanes and do as much good as they possibly can within their legal constraints. And third, when a utility does act in this way, as this powerful partnerships program is attempting to illustrate, when a water utility does act in this way and strives to be an anchor institution, then you will find allies and partners that might be non-traditional. And that's how I got to find my amazing partner, Miesha Mitchell at Cooper's Ferry. So I will turn it over to Miesha, who will then take us through the presentation, the next stage of it.
Thanks, Andy. You can move on to the next couple of slides. You can skip to. Andy already started talking about the city of Camden. So just to give a little context for our presentation, we are both from, or have worked in, I am a native of Camden, New Jersey, the land of the Lenni Lenape Indian Native Americans. And it's a city that has a strong history. It's the home of recording sound with the RCA Victor Talking Machine Company and Campbell Soup, which still calls the city home, as well as ship making and Walt Whitman, sort of all pictured here. But from decades past to what is occurring sort of in the last few decades in the city of Camden, really has been, like many urban centers in the Northeast, something that has left the city with a poor population. It is predominantly comprised of people of color. It's about 50%, 50% between Latinx and African Americans in the city of Camden. And something that you'll hear as a thread throughout our presentation, and why this partnership has really become so important for Camden, is that the city of Camden itself, the government system, also struggles with a lack of capacity. And a lot of the work that we have done as a partnership has been the result of trying to fill in gaps where the municipal government was unable to serve the needs of the population of the city. Next slide. These pictures are from the city of Camden. Camden has a combined sewer system, which means when it rains in the city of Camden and you see overflowing water into the streets or into the parks or into people's basements, it is combined sewage that is backing up into these homes, which is a public health crisis, quality of life issue. It really does impact both the mental, societal, and all of the relations that happen in our city. New Jersey has had to deal a lot with stormwater issues in the past decade, most notably from Superstorm Sandy. And a lot of times when people think of flooding in New Jersey, they are often thinking about tidal flooding that comes on our sort of the beaches from the ocean, and not necessarily thinking of the urban flooding that happens I think the first picture that shows the home was taken on the day where there was a 1-inch rainfall. So, we're not talking all the time, severe storm events. Sometimes it's more about the duration or the timing of that rainfall that can cause this severe flooding that occurs. And Cooper's Ferry Partnership, the nonprofit that I work with, and Andy Cricken's former organization, this Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority, have been working to address the localized flooding in a variety of ways. Move to the next slide. One of the earlier presenters talking about the power of showing where the value of a dollar goes. And I am a professional planner by trade. We did an exercise as a part of a neighborhood planning meeting where we asked residents who had already told us about all of the problems in their neighborhood to put their money, so we gave them actual fake dollars, and this is a time when we were still having public meetings in person, put their fake dollars to where they wanted to spend their money about, which was an exercise really of showing where the priority of the neighborhood was. And by and large, the number one priority where the most money was put to in this neighborhood was to fix the flooding that was happening along their major commercial corridor and in the major park that ran through the center of their neighborhood. And both Andy and I, through our work, had already known that flooding was happening across the city. But I think it was these meetings that helped to really amplify the voices of the residents to really show what the impact of that flooding was having on the residents themselves. Move to the next slide. Andy, you want to talk a little bit about how all of the work that we were doing, along with some of our other partners, helped to spark what was the Camden Smart Initiative?
Yes, thanks, Miesha. So as Miesha said, because Camden has a combined sewer system similar to other utilities across the older cities across the country, like New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, et cetera, these sewer systems are significantly undersized because they were built before the advent of the automobile, so before everything was paved over. So on an average day in Camden City, a dry weather day, you would have about 10 million gallons a day from people flushing or sinks, showers, et cetera. But on a wet weather day, a normal wet weather day, not like a hurricane, like Miesha said, a 1-inch storm like the picture showed, that 10 million gallons a day goes up to 100 million gallons a day. And so these pipes just aren't sized for that because they were built before the advent of the automobile and all the impervious surface. So as Miesha said, one of the issues which is so unjust is that underserved communities often, not only do they have the issues that go along with economic distress and other things. They also, the governments, as Miesha indicated, they lack resources. And so even though the combined sewer system is owned by the city of Camden, Miesha's organization, Cooper's Ferry, the nonprofit, and my utility, the regional wastewater utility for Camden and other suburban towns, just saw that it wasn't right for children to walk through puddles of sewage to get to their bus stops during a rain event, or people to have sewage backing up in the basements on a normal rain event. So we banded together back in 2010. So it's been 11 years now, and also partnered with the State University in New Jersey, which is called Rutgers, and the New Jersey Tree Foundation, and also the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection to form the Camden Smart Initiative, which basically was our war against combined sewage flooding. Next slide, please. What we basically did was we implemented a combined program of green and gray infrastructure. So part of it had to do with upgrading some of Camden City's sewer system, also expanding Camden's wastewater treatment plant, so gray infrastructure, if you will. But like Chicago that we heard earlier, we also implemented a lot of green infrastructure. And Miesha's later slides will discuss the total impact on what we've accomplished thus far. But the idea was that green infrastructure, has triple bottom line benefits. Not only building an underground pipe is very important, and you need gray infrastructure to do the work, so to speak, to convey the flow and to treat it. But green infrastructure, brings community benefits such as greening the space and also green jobs. And one of our programs was actually a green jobs program for opportunity youth to help maintain the green spaces that we were replacing. Next slide, please.
Just one other thing to point out was one of the early successes and things that we really focused on for Camden Smart was centered around community education. And residents understood that their basements were flooding. They started to watch the weather to understand that if there was rain in the forecast for this week, that they knew that they were going to have to pump out their basements, or that it was going to smell, or that they needed to figure out a different way home because the road was going to be blocked. But they often didn't understand what a combined sewer system was, or that the water that they were coming into contact with was more than just rainwater. And so it really was important for us early on to have that education as the foundation of the program, but also to get the residents involved in what we were doing so that they would also begin to adapt new practices that would also help us in our war to combat the flooding.
And so thanks, Miesha, that's absolutely right. And so here's a summary of some of what we've accomplished together: 47 green infrastructure projects, 1,500 trees planted, a rain barrel program, 4,000 residents engaged, over 40 partnerships, and $25 million invested just in the first 5 years, and there's been more than that since. One thing I'll just really to amplify what Miesha was saying about the lack of capacity, and just to show how there's a sort of a ripple effect of social injustice due to lack of capacity. So in Camden County, there's an open space fund that applies to all 37 municipalities. Camden was the only one of those 37 that had never gotten a penny of open space created for it. Why? Because they lacked a grants department to apply for the funding, and their parks they didn't have the funding for a parks department either. It had been inactive, so they had no parks department to actually maintain the park, the green space was created. So Camden, although their residents were paying the fee, more affluent communities were getting the green space, and Camden was the only one that wasn't. So the Camden Smart Initiative, the Camden Smart team, Cooper's Ferry, Miesha's organization, my former organization, the wastewater utility there, and the Tree Foundation, Rutgers, and the DEP applied jointly for open space funding on behalf of Camden, got the open space grant, and converted an abandoned factory with radioactive soil right in the middle of a residential neighborhood removed all that radioactive soil, capped it, and created a 10-acre riverfront park for the community, all with the open space fund and also with federal low-interest loan programs that were available that we applied for on behalf of the city. Next slide, please. So one thing I'll just say about that real quickly, that last program, is that, so the idea is that because of these powerful partnerships, collectively we can make up for gaps in the institutional capacity of underserved communities because, like I said at the beginning, everyone's entitled to clean water and clean waterways and not have sewage in their basement, no matter where they live. And so the idea of this collaborative approach was to make sure that we would fill those gaps. And because the Camden Smart Initiative was so successful on stormwater, we decided collectively, Cooper's Ferry and the Camden County MUA, to partner and create the Camden Collaborative Initiative, which was not just based on water, but also on brownfields problems, illegal dumping, air emissions. And we basically tried to serve as a de facto Camden Bureau of Environmental Affairs, trying to make up for Camden's lack of resources to make sure that the residents there got the same environmental protection initiatives that any more affluent community would receive. And our partners, as you can see below, were EPA, Environmental Protection Agency Region 2, and the New Jersey DEP, Cooper's Ferry, Miesha's organization, my organization, the CCMUA, and the City of Camden. Next slide. And Miesha, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Yeah, just to recap on sort of all of the talk about the partnerships. This didn't happen by chance, and it is a voluntary situation. So there are no consent decrees that force us to work together. There are actually no agreements between the parties, like unless they're like funding involved or other specific projects. But the core team that works together on this project voluntarily does so because we all believe in the mission to make sure that we're protecting the environment and the quality of life for Camden residents. And all of the partners, which are upwards of over 70 at the moment, that participate in our meetings, which happen monthly. All 4 working groups meet on a monthly basis. All of the participation is all voluntary and includes everyone from the federal government to state, county, the municipal government, working together with nonprofits and other community organizations and the residents themselves, all together sitting around the same tables and working towards creating solutions to Camden's complex problems. We call the 4 working groups our working groups. They're not just monthly meetings where we talk about the issues and need to rehash those. These are solutions-oriented meetings that occur in order to make sure that we are moving the ball forward and improving the collective quality of life for the citizens of Camden. Next slide. And with all of those partners working together, we have been able to see a lot of success collectively for the Camden Collaborative Initiative on both the policy side, so things such as the Camden Sustainability Ordinance, to the implementation of actual projects like the park project that Andy Cricken spoke about is one example of many that have already been done, or facilitating the cleanup of what was then New Jersey's largest urban illegal dumping hotspot called Camden Labs, which was also in the city of Camden, or something that would seemingly be simple, but at one point we found out that the Camden City schools had been out of compliance for recycling and stood to receive a daily fine for every single school for being out of compliance, and being able to work with the school district in order to bring them back into compliance. So much so that last year they won an award for their recycling. So quite a turnaround on that front. And the work continues with the Camden Collaborative Initiative on a number of different fronts. Flooding continuing to still be at the forefront of that work, but also looking at lead education, thinking about illegal dumping still continuing to be a problem in the city, the reclamation of brownfields land, and thinking about how we deal with the urban park system, which is growing in the city. Andy, you want to give some last words about your involvement in particular? And I think it's always important to note about why a utility got involved and how other utilities could think differently about working with nonprofits and community groups toward this kind of action.
Thanks, Miesha. Yes, definitely. Well, so the Camden Collaborative Initiative was a sort of a offshoot of the Camden Smart Initiative, and that led to the state of New Jersey recognizing Camden's success with this voluntary collaborative approach, that the New Jersey Environmental Economic Department Authority and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection created the statewide community collaborative initiative, funding 11 additional cities across underserved environmental justice cities across the state. So now there are 12, Camden plus 11 new cities, and that was based on the work of the Camden Collaborative Initiative. So one thing for our partners to think about, and especially people invested in social justice, is that if you are seeking to make a positive difference, and you will find allies as these powerful partnerships, but also hopefully replication, so that your work can actually go to help other people in other communities that you might never meet. Second, the Camden Sustainability Ordinance, that's the first bullet that Miesha has, was the forerunner of the statewide New Jersey environmental justice law that was just adopted last year, requiring that every single new action in the environmental justice community be reviewed for making sure that there's not disproportional burden on environmental justice communities. And that really came from a lot of the language was developed in our Camden Sustainability Ordinance 3 or 4 years ago. So again, the work that you do can have impact beyond the boundaries of what you're trying to help. And also, Camden was one of the 7 pilot cities across the nation in the U.S. Water Alliance's National Water Equity Initiative. And it stemmed from this collaborative initiative work that we did. So that 7 is now up to 23 cities that have now joined in. So the point is that the work we do can have a significant difference, statewide, nationally, et cetera. The last thing I'll say, though, is that, I was talking about how the work can be inflated, but it's always important to go back to those individual stories. And the last thing I'll say is that one of the programs that we developed, that the green infrastructure plan and the parks that we created required maintenance. And so we, as I alluded to, we got an AmeriCorps funding program, Cooper's Ferry and the Camden County MUA and the City of Camden together got an AmeriCorps funding to help Opportunity Youth. And thus far, 350 Camden youth between 18 and 26 have gone through this program and gotten jobs to help maintain the green infrastructure. So good does beget good. And the last thing I'll say is that I happened to be on a panel last year, right before the shutdown, with a group of people talking about community service. And one of them was from the very first cohort of our AmeriCorps program called Power Corps Camden. And this individual talked about how the Power Corps had given his first job back in 2013. And now 7 years later, he was running a youth basketball league that were helping hundreds of Camden youth. So every individual seed that we plant makes a positive difference. Thanks so much for the opportunity to do this. And I'm really looking forward to the next presentations and to the Q&A session. Thank you.
Okay, well, good afternoon. I'm Marshall Brown, General Manager of Aurora Water. I'm here with Nate Edge to talk about one of our partnerships in Aurora. We have found extreme value in partnerships, and Aurora Water maintains a dozen or more partnerships with various entities ranging from private sector entities, nonprofit organizations, other governmental agencies, and or water utilities. So again, a lot of power in partnerships, and we appreciate the invitation we received to present on one of the partnerships that we've formed to address some very specific challenges. So fun hearing about the different partnerships that have been talked about today already, and all the things that they've been able to accomplish. The partnership we were invited to talk about is a little bit different in focus, and I'll get into that. But before I go there, if we go to the next slide, Aurora is located, for those who don't know, Aurora, Colorado is on the eastern periphery of Denver. While Denver is pretty much fully developed, Aurora is about half not developed. So half of our land mass is not yet developed. We're sitting at a population probably closer to 400,000 right now. We're waiting for the latest census results. Fairly rapid and significant growth that we're dealing with in a semi-arid region. So we don't get much water supply directly within Aurora, which is one of our challenges. We're water constrained. We've developed a system where we move water up to about 180 miles into the city, then treat that and distribute it to our customers. So some challenges with water supply in an arid region. Also have a very diverse population, which provides some exciting opportunities, and along with those opportunities, sometimes some challenges. So next slide. Water conservation is extremely important, as you might imagine, in an environment or a situation like Aurora, where it's arid and we don't have water supply directly available to us. So we've developed very progressive conservation programs that are pretty robust and focused right now probably a little more on outdoor use than indoor use, but we do have programs across both of those areas. We have water-wise landscape rebates. The picture here shows one of the landscapes we were able to put in and support through our rebate program. We have established rebates for indoor water use. Right now, one of those focuses on ultra low flow toilets, again, outdoor irrigation system improvements. We have tweaked some of these programs to be more agreeable with large properties and work better in commercial applications. So a lot of opportunities in water conservation. With these opportunities though, and the challenges, again, we have run into a few limitations and things that we've struggled with. And so the partnership that Nate and I are here to talk about today addresses some of those challenges that we've dealt with. So next slide. One of the challenges we've had with rebates is low participation by low-income households. So originally, our rebates were pretty much all focused on post-purchase reimbursement and for products only. So it made it difficult for people who didn't have discretionary income to participate in some of the rebate programs because they didn't have funds available to go make the initial investment on which we would then reimburse. Installations, we've historically not rebated installations. And so that was another challenge that ended up having to sometimes pay for labor themselves if they weren't able to perform the labor. Older homes have been a little bit challenging. We've had some components, some of the demographics in Aurora have had a little bit of distrust for government agencies and what we were trying to accomplish through rebate programs. And then we've had some communication challenges with the diversity we have in the community. There are dozens of languages spoken as first languages in Aurora. And so we've had some communication challenges there, outreach challenges in some of the communities that English hasn't been their first language. So again, a few opportunities that presented themselves to us in our rebate programs. Next slide. So we wanted to look for a partner that would help us overcome some of the challenges, how we could better communicate with our customers, how we could get into some of the homes, how we could not make them maybe front money up front for participation in some of the rebate programs. So we went out looking for a partner, specifically in the nonprofit sector, that could help us implement some low-income programs for in-house applications, toilet replacements, fixtures, low-flow fixtures, et cetera. And we've found many advantages in working with Mile High Youth Corps in this program. So next slide. I'm gonna kick it over now to Nate. He's gonna talk about some of the history with the program and more of the details in the application of the partnership that Aurora has with Mile High.
Yeah, thanks, Marshall. So I want to give a brief introduction to Mile High Youth Corps itself. So Mile High Youth Corps is a 501c3. We do operate out of the city of Denver, but service many areas around what we call the Front Range. So Aurora, cities like Littleton, Westminster, these are towns you may have heard of. But we are a part of the AmeriCorps network. So AmeriCorps being a nationwide network of service providers, organizations that enroll citizens to complete service terms somewhere between 300 hours or 1,700 hours in a year. During that service, those that are enrolled in AmeriCorps will work on meaningful service opportunities in the communities that they serve in. So that can look very different depending on where you might be stationed across the US. Our focus is really on youth. So we tend to target 17 to 24-year-olds that would enroll with the organization, again, through AmeriCorps. They are earning a living stipend, and through completion of service will ultimately earn an education award that can go to ongoing education, trade services, these sorts of things. So fairly unique organization. We focus on what we call triple impact. So youth development, community improvement, and then environmental sustainability. So those three things are core and central to what we do. Now the Energy and Water Conservation Program, we typically enroll between 10 and 12 core members at a given time, and up to 20 or 25 throughout the year. So again, our core members are part of AmeriCorps. We are working to instill conservation measures for low-income households across the city and Metro Denver area. And we're really reliant on partnerships like this that we have with Aurora Water. We have a fee-for-service model, and the support from municipalities like Aurora Water really instrumental to us providing the programming to young adults so that they're earning service term education awards and learning and developing in their careers. So let's walk through the history. Aurora Water has been a key partner for us for a long time. Overall, we have been operating the Energy and Water program for about 15 years, and Aurora Water has been with us for most of that. This program was piloted in 2011. It was really just getting off the ground at that time, very modest, minimal marketing at the time, using a monthly newsletter to get the word out to residents and potential customers in the city of Aurora. There was a pretty robust application process at the time. So looking at bank statements, tax statements, this sort of thing. So pretty lengthy application process. That first year, 2011, there were 142 applicants, of which 36 households received retrofits. And at the time, the program was really developed around this idea of what materials in a home might be old, might be outdated and inefficient. And what can Mile High Youth Corps do to, again, support Marshall and Aurora Water's mission of conservation within the home. And so we look at things like toilets, we look at shower heads, and we look at things like kitchen and sink aerators. So the little nozzles on every faucet that control how much water is coming out at one time. So that's the menu of services that we provide to households. Initially, we're replacing toilets that were 3.5 gallons per flush and above, with those that might be 1.28 gallons per flush. So that's the start. And moving forward, go ahead and next slide, please. With the success of the program in 2011, I really tried to refine the program and give it some more teeth and increase outreach. And so 2012, there was more concerted effort to get the word out to residents. We were doing things like, of course, the newsletter, but also looking at things like mailing lists and trying to get materials and collateral materials into the hands of neighborhood liaisons or neighborhood councils and spread the word to those that would qualify. At the same time, I believe that the income qualifications for Aurora residents was aligned with HUD standards. So we're looking to serve households that qualify at 60% of area median income. And so that's really the line that's drawn for who qualifies. 2013, again, sort of advancing the processes, making things a little more streamlined, a little easier for those folks to apply and for Aurora Water staff to qualify homes. Started using a low-income energy assistance program, which is known as LEAP. This is part of Colorado's Department of Health and Human Services. And LEAP is enrolling again, residents that qualify based on income to help with bill assistance. So it's a nice entry point for these type of services. It does align with the same income standards that we try to outline for any customers, any residents that we're working with, and really streamline the process of getting people aware of the services, make it easier for Aurora staff to go out, audit households, and then send those referrals to us to actually do the in-home installations. 2016 and current to the current day, we've moved to even more efficient materials. We are now looking at replacing 0.8 GPF toilets. These are ultra high efficiency toilets. Still looking at shower heads, still looking at aerators. And an important piece of what we also provide is around education. So there's an education component to all this. It's one thing to put the materials in and know that those are conserving water overall, but it's also important for household users to understand where conservation comes in. So things like laundry, watering lawns, these sorts of things. Those are an add-on service that we try to provide to households. So core members are trained up, of course, to do all the installations, but also talk to customers about habits and behaviors. Next slide, please. I mentioned before that core members come in with an expectation that they're going to be able to serve and give back to the community, but it's important for us as a program to also provide career development, career readiness training. And so Aurora Water has been great with this. It's really a win-win for both of us here. We have partnership beyond the program wherein which core members can be touring facilities, learning about new job opportunities, again, building resumes, and just kind of seeing what's out there for them beyond serving with our organization. So Aurora Water has been a great partnership for that. You can see some photos here of treatment facilities and our core members that are going out and actually learning about what goes on behind the scenes for a water department. Next slide. Quickly run through some statistics and metrics here for you. So here is the history of the program overall. You can see that in year 2, we really doubled that initial service offering to residents. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, we have seen a slight decline, and so we're looking at that as partners. We are looking at new ways to qualify toilets. So more recently in 2020, we have dropped the qualification of toilets to 1.6 gallons per flush. So any toilets that are above that flow rate, we will be replacing in the future. So we're hoping that opens it up to more residents and that it will qualify more folks. We're also looking at this impact of sort of market saturation, if you will. This is a program specific to homeowners. So, you know, are we reaching sort of that saturation point of we've reached out to the homeowners that really qualify and want these services. Of course, 2020 had the COVID impact. We're hoping to get back on track this year. We're also looking at nonprofit organizations in the city of Aurora to also offer these installations. Next slide. All right, so here's some conservation totals. What does it actually mean to go in and do this work? What does it actually do for the households themselves and for Aurora Water? And so overall, you can see just based on the toilets that were installed between 2016 and 2019, we did about 180 total. Estimated water saved per household was nearing 15,000 gallons of water per year. Next slide, please. These are estimated conservation totals over the life of the partnership. And so we're sort of backdating some of the home serviced and estimates on what was installed based on historic rates of installation. But again, you can see overall, including aerators and shower heads, we're looking at an annual water conservation against the baseline of roughly 11 million gallons of water. So a very significant impact for all the households that have been served over the time that we've been partnered. And next slide. And of course, it's great to talk about conservation, and we're certainly in the game for that. But for the homeowners, for the residents that actually live there, it does often come down to the dollars and cents. So not only are we providing the free service up front, and that value is captured here, but we also look at things like financial savings over time. And so that's fairly significant as well. So average annual savings just through toilet installations, we're estimating around $89, $90 a year just in saved in water bills. And next slide, please. And of course, when you include the other materials, that number grows. And it also gets into energy conservation as well. So things like shower heads, aerators can really help a home save on energy costs. Obviously, you're not heating as much water if less water is flowing through those types of materials. So overall, lifetime savings for all households estimated over 10 years is somewhere in the range of $500,000. In average household savings per year is somewhere around $160 per year. So, Ian, next slide, please. I actually think that might be it. Sorry.
And I might just add a little bit. I probably should have done a little bit better lead in that this program, the water conservation results associated with these toilets is stacked on top of our normal indoor fixture rebates, where we replace a lot of other high flow fixtures in more the conventional means, which is customers can go out and purchase toilets if they don't meet these low income requirements, and then we'll give them a rebate for the cost of the indoor fixtures, toilets or the main one. And this program again covers all upfront costs for an income qualified customer. So there are no out-of-pocket costs for the customer that qualifies for this program specifically. So again, great partnership for us, been highly successful. And if we can, the slide that was shown earlier that showed a couple $1 million or a couple million gallons of water savings per year to the utility, that generates about $50 million of avoided costs for us in going out and acquiring, purchasing water rights, acquiring and developing those supplies to meet new demands in the city. So very cost-effective program for the utility and for the customers. So with that, I think we're probably done.
All righty. Thank you all so much. I am so excited, inspired by all of your stories. And we have a lot of questions that came in. So I'm going to ask all of our speakers to come back on camera so we can see you. And we're just going to get started so we can try and get through as many as we can. And I'll ask for you to keep your answers a little bit concise because we have about 12 minutes. So we're going to do the best that we can. So this first question is going to take us back to Chicago. So Megan, Commissioner, folks want to know, what advice would you share with community groups and utilities that are interested in launching a similar program? So can you speak to that for us?
Sure. So we are very thrilled to have a partner like Healthy Schools Campaign. And as Meg said earlier, one of the big parts of this program is getting community engagement and community involvement. So maybe Megan or Meg can speak to, how we get our communities involved and how might others in other areas start a similar program.
Sure, yeah. And I would also say probably one of the biggest pieces of advice I would give as sort of the partnership manager, something, John, that you talked about in the beginning, which is, everyone has a different set of goals, but a common mission, right? Or a different reason why we're all here, and to leverage each other's experience and expertise and not reinvent any wheels. And then the next thing I would say is exactly what Commissioner was saying, is making sure that our communities are engaged, involved, and excited for what's happening. This is where they live. This is their schools. This is where their kids go and play, and where their teachers go and work. And so making sure that process is transparent, it's equitable, and it allows for as much type of participation as possible. So making sure everything is, in the languages that are spoken and understanding the power dynamics of that community as well.
And a big piece of this, because it's a playground, is that we do get the children involved.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you. So again, Mr. Thoreau, your story was very moving, and there were several folks that came in, several questions that came in about, really maybe, Hope, maybe you can speak to this, and Mr. Thoreau, I'd love for you to add some thoughts as well. how do you begin to remove that stigma attached to people who might not have access to adequate sanitation, so folks can feel comfortable coming forward and getting help? So can you all share some thoughts about that?
I think John would be the best person.
Okay.
And then, of course, I can always add something, but please tell us, John.
Okay. You know, I prayed for that question. It is very difficult to gain people's trust. But I read something this morning which kind of goes like this. Those people who can see the pain in your eyes, and those people who can see the heaviness in your heart, those are the people that you allow in. Meaning that you have to trust. It's very hard to convince people that there's help out there. It's not easy, but you can't give up. And I'm gonna say this real quick. It's just like I was telling Hope and her staff last year. Those of you who do this every day, please don't give up, because there are people like me that need you, and you can't give up. And we appreciate you. Just don't give up on us.
Hey, Jolene, may I say one thing? And thank you, John, for saying that. We've been working with communities for 30 years, and we hear people say, you did it. You helped us.
Yes.
There's so many communities that organizations say they're going to help, and then they don't help.
Amen.
So I just want to add that. So that's how you gain trust, because now people are calling me, hey, can you help me with water? So because
That's
John.
right. That's right.
And I think that speaks volumes, because you've been there for 30 years and trust doesn't happen overnight. So thank you both. And for my Camden folks, there were some questions about the SMART program, and specifically, how is the community a part of the decision-making process, and how is that actually achieved?
Sure. I think I talked early on about the importance of involving the community and the education efforts, but we involved the community early on in educating us as well. So we had meetings initially early on where we invited the communities to come and circle the areas on the maps where it was flooding in their neighborhoods, to help us to identify where they knew that the problems were. So we had our data from our engineers, but those engineers weren't living in those communities. And so we definitely believe through this initiative that the community is the best resource, and really we're able to utilize the community to help to educate us so that we can provide them with the best tools to help to co-create together some of the things that we did in order to help to facilitate the flooding in their neighborhoods.
That's spot on, Miesha. I'll just add that we were lucky in Camden to have so many people like Mr. Thrower, that inspired us. That we couldn't quit because it wasn't fair for children to have to deal with combined sewage flooding in their neighborhoods, or Mr. Jones or Mrs. Smith to have to deal with it in their basements. So that was what kept us moving on, and they gave us the advice, but also the strength and the impetus. So thank you, Mr. Thrower, and Miesha and I and our teammates were lucky to have such amazing people in Camden that inspired us to keep pushing.
Might I give you one word to think about for everybody? Compassion. That's what it's all about, compassion.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. And Andy, there was one question that came in for you specifically. Did the water utility get any complaints from other suburban municipalities for the work and all the great stuff that was happening in Camden? Can you speak to that?
Yes, and so it's important. I said one of the takeaways that the water utility, should be an anchor institution. That if you do so, you'll find allies, and that is absolutely for sure. Like my amazing ally Miesha and many others that we together had. But you also will find people who will, seek to criticize you, because our utility was a regional utility that served Camden, but also 36 suburban towns. And I think the key to that is that is important, number one, to make sure that you stay in your legal lane, seek to widen your lane, but always stay in it. Don't get out of it, but seek to widen as much as possible. Second, it was really important to find funding. So like, for example, a lot of the projects that we did, that open space grant that the things that Camden was entitled to, they just didn't have the resources. So it was more sweat equity than actual rate impact on the suburban communities. We never had to go and raise rates for the suburbs in order to help the city. It was always finding funding that was available or using our own efficiencies to make, and our own effort to make sure that we could provide these services to the city without adversely affecting the suburbs. And in fact, we were able to lower the rates for Camden residents, offering them a host community benefit, but without raising rates to the suburbs. If we'd had to raise rates for the suburbs to lower the rate for the city, that would have been, a political non-starter. But by finding efficiencies in funding, we were able to do both, lower the rates for the city and provide services without adversely affecting. I'll just say one real anecdote real quickly. I did get one complaint from this resident from a suburb. Oh, I see you're putting a park in Camden. Why don't you come and put a park in our town? And I said, well, if you would be willing to let us put our sewage treatment plant in your town with all the sewage and the odors and the sludge, then we'll build a park there too. And the guy got it. He said, that's right. He understood it. So anyway, thanks for that question, Jalon. And it's important for water utilities to seek their allies and be prepared for their opponents.
Thanks, Andy. And going to Marshall and Nate, I mean, again, just awesome and exciting, all that you were able to do, even in a COVID situation. I was thinking about your last slide that you shared, Nate. But there was a question that came up around, does the city plan to expand the program to the outdoors? So like installing water efficiency and like climate appropriate landscaping or irrigation measures for income qualifying residents. Can you all speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, good question. We've actually done that. We consider it a separate program right now, though. So it's a slightly different partnership that Nate and I probably ought to visit on a little bit more and see if Mile High is interested in that space as well. But yeah, we have a water-wise landscape program that typically requires people to purchase the materials, install the landscape up front, get an inspection, etc. We do an income qualified program, we call it Greatscapes, where if they go through the same income qualification process, they can then qualify to have a water-wise landscape installed in their front yard. They do, in that case, it's a little interesting. We ask them to sign essentially a contract that says they'll maintain the landscape in the condition we install it. And we've been able to do between usually we only get about 5 or 6 of those a year installed. Those are a lot more intensive, but that's another program we have. Good question.
Awesome. Thank you, Marshall. And Nate, you talked a little bit about some of the adjustments that you had to make in terms of COVID. What are you thinking about in terms of moving forward? Are there any kind of shifts you're going to make with the program, or were any of the changes that you've made now, will that carry over permanently?
Yeah, I mean, we were significantly impacted. We did suspend our services for the greater portion of last year, just out of health and safety concerns. We're always interested in expanding the opportunity to give young Corps members a chance to serve and learn new skills. And so just as Marshall was pointing out, these ideas to get into outdoor xeriscaping is something we are actually looking at now. There is some word coming down from the larger AmeriCorps network that there's going to be additional funding for conservation measures for action against climate change coming around. And so we keep our door open for anything along those lines. We're definitely interested in expanding and finding new pathways for Corps members to serve.
Awesome. Thank you, Nate. And so I know we're coming close to time, but I want to give everybody at least one last thing to share. And the question that I have for you all is what is the one piece of advice to, let me see, the 51 or so folks that are with us, that you would say that you want folks to take away and take action on as they seek or continue to build or foster or sustain partnerships that they already have that are working to advance water equity and awareness. So what's one piece of advice in 30 seconds or less that you want to leave with our folks that is practical, useful, operational? So I want to start with, maybe we'll start with Marshall.
Got to unmute. I guess I would say stay passionate and open-minded. There's a lot of opportunities in this space, and I think there's more and more opportunities that come our way every year. So, and these types of forums are a great mechanism to pick up on some of those ideas. Thank you.
Thanks, Marshall. On to you, Nate.
Yeah, thank you. I wrote down basically to get buy-in from communities. We are always looking at ways to engage those that live in the communities we're trying to serve, to join on with us, become core members and serve. And I would say channel and empower the passion that the next generation has. They're going to carry us forward with this. They're going to face those realities of climate change. And so I think that passion and empowerment is great to hand off to the next generation.
Thank you. Meg.
So I think I have two, and one is, especially when one is to have like a strong central partner who is documenting and facilitating and really being able to make sure that everybody is keeping the end goal in mind, right? Celebrating the successes, no matter how minor they are along the way, because the challenges can be great along the way, especially when we're dealing in the public, agency sector. And then also to just be nimble, seek feedback and input, and then adjust as much as you can to address that, to make sure that you're always being successful along the way.
Thank you, Meg. Commissioner.
Hi, I would say to think creative, think out of the box. I mean, I don't think any of us would have thought, 5-10 years ago that we could use green infrastructure to capture rain and stormwater underneath a playground. So just keep your mind open for new ideas. Don't have tunnel vision, and just be open to new ideas.
Thank you. Andy.
Thanks, Jalan. Strive to do as much good as you can by seeking opportunities to widen your lane, to look for chances to do as much good. You look at everything you're doing from the lens of equity. So you're optimizing the good that you do. Remember the people that you're serving, like Mr. Thrower, who are our communities. That's who we're here to serve. And when you try to do good, you will find amazing allies, like I found with Miesha and her team and our partners.
Thank you, Andy. Miesha.
I'll provide some operational advice, and that is leave your egos and often your organizations to the side. So think about Camden Smart. We rebranded to a new initiative so that we could not be under the banner of a particular organization, because it really is a team effort, and that really does often help the initiative to go a lot further.
Awesome. Hope.
Hello. Well, the commissioner took my first one, so I had to brainstorm, dig out something. But anyway, what I would say is don't be afraid. Some of the communities people are actually afraid to work, as they are afraid to tell us their story. So let's go in with open eyes, and I always say, go in and make a difference. We have to make sure we end the project, and we have to make sure that we do what is right, like Andy has said so many times, and thank you so much, Andy, for that. And also, I appreciate in hearing all of your stories. Very grateful to me, and I hope that what we said touched you as well.
Yeah, then Mr. Thrower.
I really got two. Number one, communicate. Do not be afraid to communicate to folks like me. Don't assume that we understand the technical terms that you may come in with, because a lot of our folks are not very well educated, and we have to face that. And the other thing is, I would love for you to consider putting more people out there like myself to tell their stories, because the world sees, I'm gonna be honest with you, the world sees you folks, you know, highly educated, smart people. Put some regular folks out there, people that don't mind telling their stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer, and thank you
You're
all
smart
for
too, John.
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
Oh, I said, John, you're smart too.
Yeah, I was there. I'm telling you, Mr. Brewer, there's a lot of folks with degrees that are degree fools. So, you know, don't discount. And we are so glad to hear your voice. So thank you all for your advice. And gosh, you have inspired me, and I hope that folks have been inspired as well. So with that, it's been a wonderful opportunity to be a part of this conversation. And Georgia, I will turn it over to you.
Miss Jaylene, may I ask everyone that's on here to just look forward and let's take a group picture, guys. This is the best we can do right now. And I have to show my bosses that I was working past 5. All right, so Marshall, look around. Marshall, turn around now. Okay, all right, well, I'll go ahead. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, guys. We'll put it up on our website.
Thanks, Hope.
Well, that was an incredible session. I really am a heartfelt thank you to all the speakers today for sharing your stories and for being part of our summit. Thank you also to the audience for your engagement. I'd also like to thank our sponsors. And our last item of the day for programming is going to be our sponsor networking lounge. So, you know, please drop by to speak with our sponsors live and learn more about their innovative products and services designed to foster sustainability in your communities. Win points toward the prizes in What Are We Winning? And we are also running raffles for all attendees of the sponsor networking events. In fact, I'd like to announce our raffle prize winners from the last 2 sponsor events, Dina Eganoff and Marianne Warmerdam. Thanks again, everyone, and take care.